Well, hello and welcome to Rosie's Preserving School. We're about halfway through this season and we're going to make another chutney this evening, a really seasonal one, but one that's really, really useful to use all the year round in actual fact. First, I want to have a quick look at last week's pumpkin chutney. I still have one pumpkin on the table here, which is going to be made into the same chutney, but it turned out rather wonderful, which you can probably see in the jar there, the bits of chili and all the chunks of pineapple, the slivers of ginger, the sultanas, and that's going to be a very, very useful chutney to have on the shelf. So I'll be making this other pumpkin into the same chutney, and it made almost 6 500ml jars, the recipe last week. So, you know, it's quite economic and certainly long lasting. We're going to look at another chutney this evening, but first I want to show you a miracle. I mean, we don't often get to see a miracle, but I just want to show you this little tiny seed in my hand there. And the miracle is that it doesn't matter what you plant, it all starts with that tiny little seed, and then we end up with something, as in this case, as fabulous as this red cabbage, which I think is just a sort of miracle of nature. I mean, I never failed to be amazed by all the intricacies of how it all fits together and how big they grow as well. Please don't worry if your cabbage isn't as big as this. I did ask the farm shop for a red cabbage, and they always seem to, whenever I ask for something for classes, think that I need to hand it round to everybody to make. So again, I'll be making 2 lots of this, but it is fabulous. And I just think, what I always want to do is get some nice plain fabric and just sort of go like that and make a lovely pattern from it. I mean, that is one of the things. It does stain your hands rather, but it never fails to be amazing to me how things grow, and they all grow into different things, and you know, but they all produce a lot of things for us to actually use just from one tiny seed. It's the same with runner beans. You know, you plant one runner bean and you'll get kilos and kilos of beans just from one plant. So please reconsider, if you're not you don't call yourself a gardener, but you can grow 3 runner beans in a pot on a patio or something and have beans all summer long. And I just can't see an argument against it, really. Red cabbage are a bit more challenging to grow, but even so, well worth the effort. And this is the time of year when us gardeners are starting to look at seed catalogues and so on and plan what we're going to be growing. So I'm just going to leave the extra half to one side because it's rather big and going to be in the way. And I'm not even sure I use the whole of the other half in the chutney. I'll see how it cuts up. But certainly a smaller cabbage, kind of about this size, is plenty for this recipe. So I could use the other half to make a dish in the slow cooker that I can then put into bottles ready to have with roast dinners in the winter, and that would be the red cabbage, apples and onions and some red wine and a bit of vinegar, all baked in the slow cooker. So, you know, that's another way of using it when you've got far too much, really. So the one characteristic on the board here between all these ingredients is how red they are. So that's done on purpose. This is a very red or dark purple chutney, and I'm going to get straight on and get it in the pan, and then we can talk about specifics afterwards while it's cooking. The only things that aren't red are the salt and the apples, which I have here. I've already prepped because I had a lot that I had to sort of cut up carefully and sort of take bruises out and so on. So I did that beforehand. They're just in plain water. They're going a bit brown. I only did them about half an hour ago, but I'm not worried because they're going to end up red as well. So it doesn't matter. So I've got the cabbage. And what I'm going to do is take off the outer leaves, and it gets better and better. Inside is the most glossy purpley colour that is just fabulous. And now you've got to sort of chop it so that it ends up sensible sizes, and you can either sort of cut it across like that, but I'm going to go this way just because it's easier, and then I should go back the other way and cut it again. So I'm going to slice it quite thinly. And the patterns just get absolutely incredible. And of course, they'll all be unique. There won't be two cabbages in the world the same. Once you get down, if you've got a smaller cabbage, once you get down to the sort of white core, you need to be sort of taking some of that out. You don't need those thicker bits in the chutney. So cut round them and keep them out. You need the sort of nice fleshy bit, really. Just make myself a bit of room. I'll put that on one side for a moment. I've got my pan here. And I'm probably just going to go back the other way. I've got 2 or 3 bits there together and sort of cut them in thirds. You want quite strandy bits in the chutney, but not so long that they're difficult to get in and out of the jar. If you don't fancy that, you can chop them all up into little pieces if you want to, but I quite like the characteristic of this. So these bits have got no white core in them because they're at the top of the cabbage. So I'm not being too fussy about what I put into the pan. Third. And you don't have to have an exact amount. It will all cook down and it will all be beautifully flavoured in the spices. So the top bit I'm going to cut across. It's a bit like making coleslaw if you've ever done that with a white cabbage. You can make coleslaw with a red cabbage, of course. It's not quite so common. I'm just going to do 2 or 3 more slices, and then I'm going to add the vinegar and then put it on to start cooking while I chop everything else. I reckon that's about equivalent to a smaller whole red cabbage. So I'm going to put that to one side. I will use it all, none of it will be wasted. I'm going to cut across these again. Now I'm going to add my vinegar, which is balsamic vinegar, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And there's 1.5 pints, which is 500, about 750 ml of balsamic vinegar. So that's going to go in. I am actually going to put all of it in. And then I'll just put it on to start cooking, and I'll add the other things as they're prepared. Now I've got red onions here. I mean, they are more purple than red, but you know what I mean. So with these, I'm going to mimic the red cabbage. There's another miracle there. The inside of a red onion is just beautiful. So I'm going to cut it across and leave it in not whole rings, but half rings, and cut it quite thinly. Again, if you don't like the idea of the long pieces of onion in the finished chutney, you can cut it up smaller. I might have to do that with the end piece. I'm always afraid it's going to slip, and I'll take out the base as well. I don't really want that in there. I've actually got 3 onions because I've got 2 huge ones and 1 smaller one, but the recipe is 4 of everything: 4 onions, 4 beetroot, not 4 cabbages, but 4 apples. They're quite easy to remember, and you don't have to have a specific weight. One, my little one. Some of this into the pan. Give myself some room. Another big onion there. This one actually got starting more patterns, you know, it's not just going around, it's got sort of smaller onions inside. I'm just reading the comments. Yeah, Rachel's done some artwork sort of reminiscent of the patterns of the red cabbage. She's going to show us it when we're sort of more underway, which will be great. That's kind of what I want to do. I just wish I had more time in my life to actually pursue these things. Even if they didn't come out particularly well, it would be fun trying. I always think, you know, printing fabric with vegetables especially is quite fun, and dyeing them as well with the skins and so on is quite surprising in some cases. I'll read your Brenda's comment in a moment. Brenda saying, did I have to sell a grandchild for that amount of balsamic? Would red wine vinegar do, or is it too astringent? It is astringent on its own, but you could add half and half. You could add some balsamic mixed with some red wine vinegar. I've done that before now, when I just haven't been organised to have enough. But it is getting, you know, for this sort of thing, you wouldn't need the kind of specialist, you know, the highest value balsamic. A kind of equivalent to cooking sherry would be fine, you know, cooking balsamic, because there's all the other flavours as well. It's just such a lovely rounded flavour, which goes particularly well with these ingredients. Right, so that is the onions and the cabbage. The beetroot, I've got 3 beetroot here peeled, and I have a 4th one. Now, the recipe does say to scrub them well, and if the skins are good, you can leave the skins on. There's no need to peel them. Now, this time of year, that's unlikely to be the case because they go kind of quite tough around the top of the beetroot. You know, in the summer and the early part of the autumn, they're quite thin-skinned and lovely, but these need to be peeled. So I was just sort of showing you. I have scrubbed them all, but I'm not happy to put that into the chutney. But certainly earlier in the year you could do. I've already done these 3, so I'll just do the last one. I cut off the 2 ends, the root end and the leaf end. Get rid of those. And then just peel around as thinly as you can and take off that tough skin. They smell quite earthy at this time of year as well, which is fine. Because they stain your hands. I mean, if you do something lovely with your hands in your everyday life, you know, you've got your hands on show, then you need to protect them for something like this. So wear some gloves or something, but you can see it. That'll take a while to get off. Now, I'm not going to keep this in the same, because it's not long and, you know, strandy. So I'm just going to make it into chunks. About 1 centimetre square, but it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't have to be a masterclass in beetroot chopping. So this is a very good chutney to sort of use up the last of the fresh beetroot, really, from the autumn. There's no need to cook them first, they'll cook enough in the chutney, so you can just use them raw. On occasion, if I'm making this really late and I can't find any fresh beetroot, I buy those vat packs that you get in the supermarket, not the ones in vinegar, but you can get, like, they're just packed as they are in kind of their own juice, and they're perfectly all right to use in this. If they're small, then get 2 packs, but and just chop them up the same. Right, that can go in. I can hear it starting to sizzle, so the colours are absolutely glorious in the pan. So I'm going to take my apples now. I'm just going to sort of drain them off as I go. I'm not going to fuss with them. They're in slices. I should just chop them roughly. They'll cook down and be part of the base of the chutney. They'll go into a sort of pulp paste and be the thing that holds it all together, the different pieces. And provide a bit of sweetness as well, so nearly at the end of my cooking apple prep now. There's just one more session to go, and that's all the apples done finally, which should be good. It does tend to hang over you a bit in the autumn, getting it all sorted. Right, my hands will be red for days probably. So put the apple in as well. And I'll have a look at the other ingredients. A bit of a stir. Right, now prunes. The recipe states the no need to soak prunes, which is my go-to. You know, they're lovely and soft. You don't have to soak them or anything like that. You can leave them whole or you can chop them. It's up to you. It's 250 grams or 8 ounces. Even if you don't think you like prunes, then don't leave them out. They bring a real richness, and it will just be part of the chutney, the finished chutney. You won't be able to sort of separate them out from it. It's all texture and surprises and things like that. They just play their part. Now, having said all that, I went to my store and couldn't find a single prune. Apart from the French prunes I've got, which are the kind of, as you used to buy prunes, you need to soak them, they have a stone in them, and I just thought, oh, I can't bear it, you know, having to do all that fiddling about. So I had a brainwave, and I've got a jar of spiced pickled prunes that I did last winter. So I'm going to put those in because they are the no need to soak prunes. If I can get them open, I might have to ask for assistance. I'll give you that to open. And yes, they are pickled. They're in their own vinegar and so on. Well, they've soaked it all up, as you'll probably see in a moment. But they'll be fine to go in. They're lovely and soft. And they've got a little bit of their own juices down there, and they'll just bring. It's a chutney after all with vinegar, so they're going in as my prunes. Happy days. I'll do it that way, then you can see how gorgeous they look. Should you feel like going back over last year's recipes and doing the spiced pickled prunes, which I think we did as one of the hamper recipes or Christmas recipes. Fabulous. Get out as much as I can of all that liquid. So that's a very good reason for making them, actually. You can see how glossy they are, and they'll be in the finished chutney. Okay, I do up the French ones, put them back on the shelf for another day. So that's the prunes, that's the main constituents in the headline of the red cabbage, beetroot and beetroot chutney with prunes and balsamic vinegar. We have some spices to put in and the sugar. So, keep my little seed. The sugar is beautifully dark muscavado. That's what I'm using. If you've got the lighter brown sugar, that's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But I think this recipe particularly lends itself to the really robust, toasty flavour of the dark muscavado sugar. And being a dark purple chutney, this is going to be perfect as in the base. Sue's asking if you can use drained tinned prunes. Yes, perfect. Be absolutely fine as long as they're not too sweet. You know, they're not in a sweet syrup. If you can just find some that are plain, that would be fine. So I'm going to put my sugar in, and that is again 250 grams or 8 ounces of the dark muscavado or the light brown sugar, whichever you've got. This has got lumps in it. It's always got lumps, but they'll dissolve in everything else. So that's going in. Another stir. The muscavado has been on and off the shelf all the last few days because I made my mincemeat Monday evening, I think. So it just is just such a lovely thing to make, the luxury mincemeat. You know, if you want to make some for Christmas, now is the perfect time to do it. So we've got salt. Sticking with the ratios, we've got 4 teaspoons of salt. This is sea salt, which I always put into things, nice and flaky and a nice flavour. I mean, you won't taste it individually, but it hasn't got any chemicals or anything like that, like table salt has. So that can go in, and that will be stirred in a moment. And then we've got our spices. Now, these are quite robust as well. Leave that. Because this is all big flavours and it all melds together. So you want something that is going to actually be tasted. My hands look terrible, don't they? Stained purple. So we've got cloves. We have my all-time favourite winter spice, the allspice berry. We've got cinnamon sticks, a couple of pieces. And then it says 2 star anise. Now my whole star anise I save for if I need it, if it's going to decorate something and I want a whole one. So I tend to put in the equivalent bits, because in a packet you'll always have a few whole star anise and then some bits. So this kind of thing, when we're going to be putting it into a spice bag or tying it into muslin or into a jelly bag, these are ideal. This is just the pieces of broken star anise, but they've still got a massive amount of flavour, quite an aniseedy flavour to them. So the pieces of cinnamon stick go in, taking up all of the room, and the star anise. If you don't like any of these flavours, then you can substitute. You can put in ones you do like. I mean, you might prefer not to have anything. So, but I think that would be a shame. See if you can find some that you do like. The allspice berries is 1 teaspoon of allspice berries there. use the berries rather than the ground because they have a much stronger flavour. And then 1 teaspoon of cloves. And it fascinates me that these are the actual buds from a flower. I can't remember the name of the bush it comes from. I think it's, I'll have to look it up. But they're the actual buds, and I didn't know that until relatively recently. And they go in as well. And then I pull up my spice bag so they don't come out again. And tie it off so that it doesn't come undone in the chutney. And then you've got to sort of poke it into the chutney so that the vinegar will go in and collect the flavouring, and it will all get mixed in, and it makes a delicious, enticing smell as well. So that's going to be underneath all of that. And you can see already it's cooked down quite a lot. It doesn't take very long to cook this chutney, really. It doesn't have to be thick. As I think I told you last week, in my early marriage years to my first husband, my mother-in-law adored pickled red cabbage, and I'd never come across this in my family life. We didn't have things like that. We didn't, you know, we were big pickle and chutney eaters. So this was quite a sort of revelation to me, this pickled cabbage, and the sheer kind of routine of it, the tradition of making it just before Christmas so that it wouldn't go all soft. It was salted and drained, and then it would take up the vinegar and stay nice and crunchy. And there would be jars and jars and jars of this pickled red cabbage, which looked beautiful in the vinegar, beautiful colour, and but I just didn't like it. I've never been able to eat very acidic things. You know, satsuma is about as much acid as I can take, and I just couldn't get on with it at all. And as I got older, I thought I'm going to try and make something, a preserve, with the red cabbage that is just so much more mellow to eat, which is partly why the balsamic vinegar is in there, because it is less acidic tasting and is easier. It's a much softer, rounded flavour. So that's where my recipe came from. That's where my starting point. I'm just going to put this sticky mat over here. Give this another stir, and then we'll talk about the vinegar for a bit. So, as this is my red cabbage substitute, pickled red cabbage is just cabbage, the red cabbage in vinegar. So it is very, it's not thick at all. It's just, you know, the vinegar is as it is. So my chutney kind of replicates that. It is a little bit thicker because it's got the apple in there eventually, when that eventually breaks down, but it's certainly not a thick chutney that you can put in a sandwich. So the balsamic vinegar, and I've got a little bit I kept in a glass here. It's very, very dark, and it is thicker than normal vinegars. I don't know if we can switch that onto the camera so that you can see the colour close up. And there we go. It's really, really dark, and it's got quite a sweet smell to it. And of course, as we said earlier, it's hideously expensive normally, but it is horses for courses. You can pay a fortune for it. It's been aged, you know, in special barrels and treated with reverence and everything, and costs an absolute fortune, just as you can with wine. But unlike other alcohol-based vinegars, because they're all a derivative of alcohol of some kind that's been fermented out into vinegar, and whether it's cider vinegar, white wine vinegar, sherry vinegar. I guess sherry vinegar comes the closest to balsamic if you wanted to replace it. But balsamic is not made from the end alcohol. It's brewed from the must, the grape must, before it's made into wine. So it's further back in the process. So when the grapes are, I suppose, crushed and everything, the grape must, as it's called, which is the juice, the skins, and the pips, the grape pips, are a kind of a pulp. And the balsamic vinegar starts its life utilizing that grape must. And then it's fermented over quite a long period of time. And it's only proper balsamic if it comes from, there's two regions in Italy, and mainly it's Modena that it comes from. And it's got special status, of course, because it's, you know, a very special product from done in a particular way from a particular area. And so they ferment it and age it, and according to all the processes involved and the quality of the grape must that started with, because obviously just as you've got, you know, cheap and cheerful everyday wines, you've got cheap and cheerful everyday grape must that they come from. So that's where the price difference comes in the end product. But it's used in all sorts of ways traditionally, and it can be very, very special. And you can be served it as a sort of canapé or the starter of an Italian meal, just slivers of cheese with sort of 2 or 3 dots of balsamic vinegar carefully placed on them, are the very most expensive balsamic vinegars. Or as we more often find it in the UK, you'll be served balsamic vinegar and olive oil either separately for you to mix, or it will be mixed in a little dish and served to you, but it separates again, and you use your pieces of bread to stir it around. And you know, it's a very good appetizer really for the meal to come, and we've all mostly got used to that in this country. I mean, it's only one generation though, really, because my parents wouldn't have known anything like that. You know, it would be unheard of, and so it has become something that we're familiar with. But also it can be served just in a glass, in a nicer glass than this one, but just in a little glass as a digestive after the meal. So you would finish your very rich, perhaps several courses Italian meal, and then be served a small glass of balsamic vinegar to drink to help with your digestion. And that is not something I've experienced, but I can imagine that that's how it would be. That would be really delicious. It might be something we just try anyway to see what it's like. So the thing is to look carefully if you're going to use it in something like this. You know, there's big supermarkets. You can buy it an acceptable one at an economic price, and it will be absolutely fine. If you're going to drink it at the end of a meal in a glass, I suggest you probably are going to be going for a better quality one. But the main thing is the rounded flavour, and you haven't got that overriding acidity that you have with the other wine vinegars. So that's cooking down nicely. We're going to have a look, we'll just talk about how you could actually eat this. I mean, you can have it just as a chutney, and you know, you've got your Boxing Day spread, you've got your cold turkey, cold ham or whatever, and you can have dishes of it, and it would be very, very nice to have with that. I think also there are other alternatives. You could have it, because it's not an acidic preserve in that way. I couldn't imagine doing this with any of the other preserves that I make, but you could have it on a jacket potato for lunch, a good spoonful of the red cabbage and a good handful of grated cheese on the top would make a very, very tasty light lunch, I think. And the other way you can use it is to mix it with mayonnaise as you would for coleslaw. Use it as a red coleslaw, or you could use it, to top things like a curry or something like that. Or perhaps mix it with plain yogurt in that case. We've talked about this before. Your store cupboard of preserves are not just there to be used as a sort of accessory on the side of your plate. Really look at them, remember what you made them with, what the ingredients they've got, and try and use them more generally as part of the meal to make up an ingredient, an addition in their own right, rather than just being a sort of pretty afterthought on the side. And there's lots of preserves that you can do that with. So this is cooking really, really nicely. As you can probably see, everything's kind of getting to be uniform red. There's still bits of apple in there that are paler, but that's fine. I've got some big jars here I'm going to use. Again, I used the 500ml one for the pumpkin chutney last week, which is this straight-sided one. Again, great to fill and great to get things back out of the jar once they're in there. Not too fiddly. This is my favourite jar. I'm sad enough to have favourite jars, even though I sell thousands of jars per week. I've still got a favourite. And sadly, it's not going to be stocked by our supplier for everyone to buy, but I have asked them if they can still find pallets of them for me, and I will be stocking them even though they don't. Which is all good, because if people want them, they'll have to come to us. But we call this the pera jar, or that it means, not surprisingly, pear in Italian, but it's got this lovely, it's like those years ago when yogurt was first sold in this country. You used to get little glass jars of yogurts, and it's kind of like that, only bigger. And again, it's big. It's got a big open neck, and there's no shoulders or anything for anything to get caught in, and it just looks, everything about it is the right proportion. And jars don't have to be sort of fancy with embossed bits or squares or anything else. That is just so pleasing to look at, I think, and fill with things like chutneys that need a lot of room. It's quite difficult with some ingredients to actually get them into a smaller jar. So that's the jar I'm going to be using, and I will have it back next year, hopefully in the first part of the year. But at the moment, we're out of stock, which I know is infuriating if you like it and you want to use it. Me showing it to you and then saying you can't have it. But I'm working hard to make sure we get it back. It's always the way, just as you get something that people like, they stop making it, or they think, oh, nobody wants this, we won't stock it anymore. But they have promised to get it for me, so this is okay. You don't really need to cook it forever and ever. It's pretty much melded. I'm going to sort of give the spice bag a bit of a bash and release as much as possible of that, its juices. I've got some nice jolly red gingham lids to go on here, which will look fun. And I must find a mat so I don't make a mess. Otherwise my table is going to be stained dark red. Not for the first time. I'll take those out of the way. They can go back up on the shelf. And for one of the few times this year, we're actually going to be jarring this up within the workshop. So that's good as well. So let's take the heat off, take the pan off, and now we hunt the spice bag. It's in here somewhere. Is that it? There's a string. Bag must be on the end of it. I'm going to give it a bit of a bash now I've found it. Take it out. And then stir it as I've bashed the spices, the flavour out. I'll stir it around so it's quite even. Another question. How long will the chutney keep? Oh, like any chutney really, it will be fine. You can just keep it on the shelf at ambient temperature, and once opened, it will still keep 2 or 3 months, no problem at all. So you don't have to refrigerate it and sort of take all the flavour out of it. It's very difficult to taste the real flavours when it's icy cold. If you feel you would prefer to keep it in the fridge, then take it out before you're going to use it, just so that it's got a chance to warm up to room temperature. Now I've got my wide mouth funnel, which I managed to find, and that's on the website. That's not the reason I'm using it, it's because it's the best thing for the job. So I've got my funnel there because things go through more quickly. Now, as with quite a lot of things that have got liquid in them, you've got to kind of try and eke them out so that you don't put all the liquid in the first 2 or 3 jars and they've got nothing at the end. So try and sort of get even ladlefuls to make sure that you've got enough fluid to go in each jar. Glorious colour. Go in. Right, now then, have I got another spoon? Oh yes, here we are. So you see what happens, you get to the top and you've got bits of cabbage and bits of apple. What you need to do, as this is particularly the case with things like mincemeat and anything that's got lots of lumps or bits in it, you need to get them covered. So if you use the back of a spoon and press it down, the liquid comes to the top. You can push down anything that's trying to climb back out of the jar. Get the liquid up over the contents and then they won't dry out. You can top it up while you're there to make sure it's right to the top. And nicely covered. Put that one down there for the moment. Our next jar. Remember to fill right to the top of the jar. Don't want any air gaps for bugs to grow or molds or anything like that. A little bit more. Probably a bit too much in there. Always top it up in a moment. So here we go again. Press that down. Yes, we're going to need some more in there. And this also helps to remove any air bubbles. You don't want air bubbles in there. Again, where things could grow, they need moisture and air. So you eliminate, when I say moisture, water and air. So if you haven't got either, your preserves are going to keep nice and safe. So press them down. This is just so they don't dry out. It doesn't really matter if they do. It's not dangerous, but aesthetically, it's not nice to have 2 or 3 bits of dry cabbage at the top of the jar that are not that great in flavour. So pop your lids on, and that will help to form the vacuum, because as this cools, it will shrink down and leave a gap, and that gap won't have any air in it. So it will form a vacuum and pop very satisfyingly when you open it. Which is why you can keep traditionally made preserves for such a long time. I have to say the shelf life on this is a year, but as you know, they will keep very much longer than that, quite safely. Right. Poke this down through my funnel. If you think you've got too much in there and it's going to overflow, then take it out where you've still got the funnel in place. Don't lift the funnel up to have a look, and then it'll all go everywhere when you lift it off. You can see if you look down the side sort of roughly how you're doing. Take that off, press down. And lid on. They look quite jolly, don't they, with a red caps on, red and white check. Oh, there, I told you I'd make a mess of the table if I didn't put something there. My chunks of beetroot on the top. Press them down in. So Brenda's going to have a go at making this, I think. She said her husband loves red cabbage and beetroot. Do you think he would like this?
I think he will love it, and he loves prunes as well. So there's just nothing to not like for him.
Happy days. That's usually the bit that people balk at, but honestly, it's all part of the flavour sensation. It's not an individual flavour, but it's a texture, you know, it's they're just lovely. I love them anyway, so especially the ready-to-eat ones. I think they make a tremendous snack, and they're very good for you, apart from the obvious sort of attributes that I think people shy away from. But as you know, we made two or three pruny things last Christmas. The energy balls in particular, I loved, and they lasted for ages. I kept them in the fridge, and if I came in from work sort of feeling a bit sort of you have one of those, and they had lots of coconut in them, and they just were so satisfying to eat, and they took away any hunger, and they were just delicious. So I should be making some more of those. I'll have to buy some more prunes first, so that Okay, we're nearly at the bottom of the pan. I think you've got the measure of it now about how to fill and evening up the liquid, filling to the top. Got a couple more there to do. Okay, well, I hope you do make some and you do like it. And it could, again, make a good hamper ingredient, you know, addition in a hamper, or for people that love her chutney, but it's unusual. It's a different one, you know. It's not the, it's intriguing, I think, rather than just sort of a rhubarb and date or something. So it would make a very nice gift all on its own, or perhaps with a nice piece of cheese or something like that wrapped up. Not to put under the tree, you understand, but if you were visiting or you were going to hand a gift to somebody, you know, that would be a very nice thing to do. And I think that brings an end to our chutney making for this year. We've covered all sorts of different textures and flavours and ingredients and so on. But that is, I think, a good seasonal one, but that you will see you through the rest of the year as well, especially if you use it in the summer as a coleslaw or something like that. Next week, we're going to be looking at some nice drinks for Christmas. It won't be quite such a mad marathon as last year. I think you can fall back on those recipes knowing with confidence how they taste and how easy they were to make. And we're going to be looking at 2 or 3 others next week that you can make and serve and enjoy, I hope. We've certainly enjoyed all of the ones that we made last year and remade them over and over, because some of them were old favourites anyway, and but some of them were new to me, and we have enjoyed them very much. So I will see you next week for that, and a happy chutney making.